Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Our guest today is Chris Galizio, the executive producer of Money Game. Chris is an experienced institutional portfolio manager with a long track record of success. Welcome to Wall Street Silver, Chris.
Thanks, Ivan. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure having you come down to Wall Street Silver. This is your first time. I wanted to get you on to talk about everything that's happening in the markets, silver, gold, interest rates. First, we'll start off with, Chris, can you discuss the impact of, the economic factors such as inflation, interest rates, and, even the geopolitical events on the prices of gold and silver? How does it affect that?
First of all, I'm not an expert on gold and silver, but just look what you're watching. The entire markets are flipped on the head. Nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why I made the movie. The opening quote in Money Game is, "The task is not to see what no one else sees, but to think what no one else has thought about that which everybody sees." So you're looking in terms of silver and gold. You're looking at a Fed and a Treasury that can't pay real rates,
Right.
right? They're talking about inflation being at 3%, but nobody thinks it's at 3%. We all know it's much higher than that. So interest rates, the money game is basically driving interest rates down and asset prices up, right? Professor Gardner describes it. He says, as interest rates fall, asset prices rise. Have you ever thought about what happens when interest rates go negative? And so if that's true, then if interest rates go negative, he raises his cup and he says, if interest rates go negative, all assets are worth infinite. My coffee is worth infinite. My desk is worth infinite.
Right.
My
Everything.
Does that make sense? Of course, it doesn't make sense, but they're manipulating interest rates.
Right.
So when one of the quotes we wanted to get into the movie, we didn't quite get this one into the movie. If the government assumes all the risk, it's the government it's the currency that's at risk. It reminds me of a scene from Superman. Lois falls out the window. Superman dives down and saves her and says, "I've got you." And then Lois says, "But who has you?" The government, the gold, the currency isn't backed by anything. And now
Right.
you're who would buy a bond with a negative yield? I see people on your podcast talk about the price of gold and the price of silver in dollar terms.
Yeah, that's all in dollar terms. That's all we ever, that's everyone in our channel, even me too. Like, how do we think of gold and silver other than anything other than dollar terms? But that's how you're going to have to do it because obviously the US dollar isn't going to last forever. The
Well, that
charade
is,
is,
that
yeah.
assumes that assumes the dollar has value.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
If I believe, and this is why I made the movie, I believe you're sitting in a sovereign debt crisis, right? Think about what happened in Germany. If the price of gold, let's put it in mark terms. If the
Right.
price of gold was 2,000 marks per ounce, all of a sudden it went to 4,000, then it went to 100,000, and if at that point you chose to sell your gold and buy marks, at the end you can look and say, look, I bought it 2,000, I went to 100,000, let's sell. Then you put it into marks and it's worthless.
Yeah, yeah. See, so how do you even value assets then?
Well, so I would put it in gold terms.
Right.
I'd put it in the stock market in gold terms. I'd put gold in oil terms. I'd put it in other terms. But we're so accustomed, we've never lived. So one of the quotes from the movie, um, the most underused books in finance are history books, because none of us have ever lived through a sovereign debt crisis. Right
Yeah.
now, you're in a situation where the governments can't pay their debt, right? They
Right.
can't pay real yields, so they're manipulating interest rates, right? So when you manipulate interest rates, everything flips on its head.
Right.
So
Right.
notice that the companies that go up the most, the companies that lose the most money. That doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
Professor will raise the book, The Efficient Market Thesis, and he tosses in the trash. And he says, smart people thought the world was flat once too.
Right.
Because markets aren't efficient. Markets are working opposite. Everything's working in, look at the companies that go up the most, Carvana, Boeing. Boeing hasn't covered their interest expense in 5 years. It's not complicated for financial analysts to understand what the value of Boeing is. And I can give you an exact answer. Zero. It's
Why?
worthless. If you can't cover your interest expense, there's no equity, right?
Right.
You
Right.
haven't
Right.
covered their
Right.
interest expense. But so the question is, why is it going up? I believe the entire system is flipped on its head. Notice what you're watching. What you get is you get price move, right? Let's talk about one of the ones that's crazy, GameStop. Price moves, then the narrative. Well, it's because they're getting in NFTs, which doesn't make sense anymore, right?
Right.
Because nobody goes to GameStop, nobody buys their games there. Then fundamentals hit, but fundamentals don't hit from what you thought it was going to hit from. It hits from because they sell shares, right? So the stock goes from 400 million, it hits 20 billion, they sell shares. They didn't make money from selling games. They got money from selling shares. I would
Right.
argue
It's from it's
now
from the stock market. It's not actually from the sales of their company or whatever.
correct, and therefore the system is a financing system. And if you look
Right.
at the tagline on the Money Game poster, it says "Don't get played," because you're getting played to finance U.S. business at this point. By the way, you look at the other side of that thing, at the other side of valuations. So so first of all, let's talk about why they're going up.
Right.
Because the ecosystem changed. It's not people investing anymore. It's machines. 63% of the market is now passive. 25% is quant. That means 85 to 87% of the market doesn't think, right? There's no humans left in market. There's no
That's
one.
insane.
It's insane, right? It actually leads to the final quote in the movie. If passive, it's from Jack Bogle, the founder of Passive. If
Hmm.
passive ever gets bigger than active, there'll be chaos and catastrophe. Our markets will fail. What you're watching is markets fail, not in the sense they go down, because when interest rates go negative, all assets are worth infinite, but in the sense that they start to misallocate resources, which is the theme of the movie. Capitalism requires risk to allocate scarce resources. But once the Fed intervened, it's the biggest line in the movie. Professor is going to say, here's the problem. Um, Capitalism requires risk to allocate scarce resources. Let me give you an example. What would happen if you remove the lions, active managers from the savannah? The gazelle population, passive investors, will explode. But then the
Right.
other student says, but then they'd be competing for scarce water resources, inflation, and die off. To which I have the biggest line in the entire movie. Correct. And when the Fed intervened in bond markets, they broke the ecosystem of capitalism. Now everything's flipped on its head. Now you're seeing companies like GameStop go up the most, Carvana. Now we're just misallocating resources, right?
Right.
So now
Right.
you're seeing productivity in the real economy isn't growing anymore, right? Productivity is down.
It just
Um,
stalled.
Everything's stalled because we're pouring trillions of dollars into companies that don't make money. Why is it happening mechanically? Think about it. In a passive world, who makes the adjustment for dilution? Nobody,
Why?
right? There's nobody that there's no humans left.
Right. Right. Right.
So in a passive world, then nobody makes the adjustment, right? So if you issue shares and you every quarter, your market cap goes up. Goes
Right.
bigger in the index. Then the passives follow it, right? So in the movie, he says, no one, Professor Gardner says, um, no one picks their own stocks anymore. It's a bunch of followers, quant following followers, passive. It's like a cat chasing its tail.
Right, right. Like you see like the GameStop thing go on, people will pour into money into that. You see AI go up, people will pour into money into
So
that.
so
Right,
you
right.
said people, right? I don't think it's people. I think 87% of the market is passive and quant. So in Money Game, we say the Reddit guys, GameStop, finally figured out how to trigger the stampede of algorithms. Just aggregate a bunch of buyers. Think of what they're doing.
Right,
All
right.
of a sudden, there's 1,000 buyers, right? The quants see buys. They're algorithms, and they see buys in the market. Then 25% of the entire market runs to it and pushes it from 400 million to 20 billion, which people could never do.
Right,
There's
because
no
85% of it is just passive.
and quant.
Right. Wow, that's crazy.
It's a bunch of so think about what a big topic that is. There's no price discovery, but if there's no price discovery in markets, there's no price discovery in gold either.
Right.
So the second biggest quote in the movie um, is von Havenstein, the head of the central bank, had a choice: print the money or trigger the revolution. So the Fed is going to have to continue to print money. They're in a Hotel California. They can check in anytime they want, but they can never leave. So if they ever allowed true price discovery, interest rates would go from 4% to 10, or 15, or whatever that is. We don't know, right?
Right, right. Because they don't show the real numbers right now.
Well, there's no real numbers. They're intervening in
Oh
bond
yeah.
markets.
Right,
In
right, right.
2019, we have it in the movie. The Fed intervened in the repo market. You can actually look on James. If you type in James Grant and turnaround, I think it was about face.
Right.
You'll see that he talks about how they stepped into the bond market and they bought every single repo. They nationalized the repo market. There was no
Right.
price discovery. So people believing that interest rates are 4%, um, it's being manipulated by the Feds. That's
Right,
the money.
right.
And what they did was they drew. Think about in interest rates in 1980, interest rates were 18%, right? Um, then in 2001, 2021, they were zero, right?
Right.
As interest rates, as debt went up, risk, interest rates return went down to
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense at all.
Where's crowding out? Where's out? So once I realized that I was on the side of math, economics, and finance, and the
Right.
rest of the world wanted to take technical analysis and stuff that didn't make sense, I was like, oh my God, I can make a movie about this. But to your point, in terms of silver, I think silver is about to go to infinite in dollar
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah, because there is no dollars. There is no
Correct.
actual right.
So think of how ridiculous that would be to say, let's talk about the gold price in Turkish lira terms
Right.
or Argentine peso terms.
Right. Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Right. So what happens? Like, are we just gonna do a repeat of the Weimar? And did the Weimar, Chris, do have like similar issues? Did their stock market have the same thing that the US is having today, where nothing makes sense? And like, our when do we head to a Weimar, solution, or like, does it keep getting kicked down the road? What do you see there?
So one of the quotes we wanted to use in you can only have one quote, right? So in terms of our tagline for the movie, we
Right.
won't don't get played. But another one was the buck stops here, the dollar stops here,
Right.
right? Because when you can kick the can down the road. Notice what's happened is the crises keep getting bigger. 1998 we had the tech crisis. 2008 we had the financial crisis, and
Right.
now we're sitting in a sovereign debt crisis. The buck stops here. It doesn't go any further than this,
Right.
right?
Like
The
you can't
government
kick
is
it. You can't kick it. You can only kick it for so long.
You can only kick it so
Yeah.
long until people start to notice that nothing makes sense, and then they shift to a different currency, and that's what the BRICS are doing, right? They've tied their currency to gold,
Wow.
right? We're no longer in the petrodollar system anymore. I mean, I just posted on that today that Saudi Arabia is basically saying we're not going to keep buying your bonds. If you're going to steal assets from Russia, we're not going to buy your bonds. That's a big threat. Who's going to buy the bonds is the question, and the answer is the Fed's going to buy every single bond. Um,
Which is insane.
which is insane. There's a quote from Larry Lindsay. He's a former Fed governor in 2015. He says it always ends this way. The Ming Dynasty, Rome, Zimbabwe, it always ends this way. The state can no longer afford its bills, is basically what he's saying, right?
Wow.
And now here we are, 9 years later, and it's so clear the government cannot pay its debt. It's not
Right.
even close. I mean, think about if interest. What do we have? We have debt of 35 trillion. If interest rates go to 10%, that's 3.5 trillion dollars at 10% of interest expense.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. Like you can't sustain that.
That's 70% of GDP. I'm sorry, 70%. I'm sorry, 70% of tax receipts.
I was gonna say, I was like, that's insane.
Well, 70%. So you'd have to cut every other item, including military, which you're in two wars right now.
Right. How are you gonna cut military spending and then
Man,
pay all the interest on the debt servicing? It's just out of control.
so it's a certainty. So I would hang on to your gold. I would hang on to your silver and just recognize at any point if you sell it, what you're buying. You're
You're
getting in
just
return
you're
cash.
getting fake dollars. Yeah,
Oh,
there's even if the silver goes to $100 an ounce, it wouldn't mean anything if you trade it for that US dollar if that dollar is dying.
what it really means is the currency is falling.
Right, yeah.
So
Wow.
the one you should look at is the one that with value is gold and silver, right? And notice also that the gold and silver stocks aren't going up like the rest of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Just the physical.
But what's going up is anything that's in the index. By the way, the system isn't able to distinguish between my coffee, my phone, or my Ford F-150.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I mean, think about it. Like if you believe that what I believe is that what's happening is every time they issue shares, it sends the stock up.
Right.
That means that would require that if you buy back shares, then it sends your stock down. Now look
Right.
at Petrobras. Petrobras paid a $3 dividend. Stock was trading at 14. The day they do the dividend, it falls to 11. Well, that year they earned 7. So it was trading. They was trading about 2 times earnings.
Right.
So the stocks that are cheap are trading incredible. Stocks that are profitable trade incredibly cheap, and stocks that aren't profitable don't make sense.
Right. They're
And
just in the crazy world.
well, think about this from a human perspective. If would you? I can ask 1,000 people the same question. Ivan, would you rather a company that earns 40 billion a year or loses 40 billion a year?
earns, of course.
Right. Then, but Petrobras earned 40 billion last year and trades at 80 billion. And Amazon lost 40 billion and trades at 2 trillion. So I just proved to you that if it was people making this decision and not machines, then we would be the reverse would be true.
Yeah, that's insane. If a company is losing 40 billion and they're worth 200 trillion or billion, that doesn't make any sense.
Correct. And so
Right.
that and by the way, you just if I asked 1,000 people the same question, 1,000 would say, okay, the company that earns 40 billion.
Right.
How come the market doesn't do that then?
Or
Because not
why?
people,
Because they're not
because the
people.
ecosystem,
Yeah, that's insane.
because the ecosystem changed.
Wow. Wow.
Right. It's
That
the
that
biggest
is
point of the
interesting.
movie.
Wow. So where can people watch this movie?
So we just signed a 10-year distribution agreement with Buffalo 8. We're right
Okay.
in the process of signing it. So it should be on streamers in about 6 months. In the meantime, we went to the Greenfield Garden Cinema. We were the second best performing movie at the cinema. We were behind Inside Out from Disney, which is like the biggest movie ever from Disney.
Wow.
We beat Furiosa, we beat Bad Boys, and now we're heading to White Plains, New York, probably in about 2 weeks. And
Wow.
then after that,
Congratulations.
thank you. So
Yeah.
so we've also gone to 5 film festivals and won best film at all 5 and best screenplay at 3 of them.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, Chris, it's such a huge pleasure having you come down to Wall Street Silver to talk to everyone. We for sure want to have you back on again as the markets develop. We'd love to have you as a regular. But yeah, thank you so much for coming down to Wall Street Silver,
No
Chris.
worries, Ivan. Happy to be here.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Nice chatting.